So the summer has come and gone, and over these last few months, I've watched 33 movies, wrote 23 pages, totaling at 18,104 words on everything I've seen. There were highs, and dear God, were there lows. I'm about to hand out the super official first annual Super Legit Maniac Summer Awards, and I expect the studios to start putting these somewhere on their posters. If you want a refresher of the films I've watched for this, then click the eye in the corner so that you can see which movies are eligible for these awards. Anyway, let's get started. A good performance can make even the absolute worst script or most boring scenes into something enjoyable or even fun. And this next award is going to be praising the men and women who knocked it out of the park by gracing the big screen. And yes, I said men and women because acting is not a gender-specific thing. Gal Gadot took a character that did absolutely nothing in Batman v Superman and turned her into one of the best superhero performances we've gotten in a long while. Despite playing a goddess, she was fairly down to earth and knew exactly how to make this character act relatable. I didn't expect this at all, and she turned Wonder Woman into something special and different from the seemingly endless line of comic book films. But even if she gave the best performance of any superhero of the past few years, that doesn't mean she gave the best of the summer. Michael Fassbender in Alien Covenant is what turned an otherwise mediocre film into something that was at least watchable. Acting as any character takes a lot of preparation and research to get right, but playing two separate characters is even harder, especially since both of his characters hinges on their interaction with each other. Watching him act was delightful, and the absolute highlight of the film was watching David and Walter act off each other, attempting to understand why the other is the way they are. The emotional range of both characters is so dramatic, and Fassbender does it without skipping a beat. Watching him switch from the robotic, subdued nature of Walter and then going to the mentally unhinged David is something that only an absolutely fantastic actor can pull off. It takes a lot to be able to do that with the amount of grace that he did. But the only thing that I feel could top someone playing two entirely different characters is literally becoming a different species. Andy Serkis in War for the Planet of the Apes is something that is so magical that I was truly lost in the character he created. While the effects of the film were absolutely incredible, it would have meant nothing if his performance didn't actually make you believe that he was an ape. The CGI was just a tool to make an already phenomenal performance even more believable. I cannot explain how engrossing he was as a character. And for the first award tonight, I am giving Best Performance of the Summer to Andy Serkis as Caesar in War for the Planet of the Apes. And for every great performance this summer, there was an equal and opposite terrible one. And thanks to a bunch of especially awful R-rated comedies, it is absolutely easy to pick this one. And trust me, each of the next few people I'm talking about are horrible, but question is, which of these is so disgustingly terrible that it deserves an award? Let's start by dissecting Tiffany Haddish as Dina in Girls Trip. I have been getting a lot of flack for saying that Girls Trip was horrible, but I stand by it. Tiffany Haddish as Dina was the worst part of a really bad movie. Her performance reminded me a lot of Amy Schumer in Snatch, and even though that movie is much worse than this one, Tiffany Haddish committed one of the biggest sins of any movie, not having any purpose to your character or comedy. In Snatched, at least Amy Schumer's jokes matched the setting and were related to the plot of the film. Tiffany Haddish was just raunchy for the sake of being raunchy, and it almost always gets in the way of the story. Whenever she's given screen time, it comes to a screeching halt for the next minute or so just so she can keep rattling on. But saying she was the worst is something I really can't say in good faith. Especially since we do have Ike Barinholtz as Jeffrey Middleton in Snatched. See, while Haddish could be ignored in her film, Barinholtz had an entire subplot dedicated solely to him. And at the end of the film, his annoying, unfunny subplot is what ends up saving the day. In an already terrible film, he was the icing on the cake. What makes the whole thing even worse is the fact that they portray him with a mental illness and do nothing but make jokes about it. But even despite making fun of somebody with mental illness, it's not the worst performance of the summer. Because Rough Night gave us Kate McKinnon as Pippa. And not only does she derail the movie, not only is her character entirely unnecessary, not only is her performance awful, but she adds literally nothing to this movie. Most of the time, the movie just forgets about her, and those brief segments are what makes the film tolerable. Nothing she says is funny or entertaining. Her accent is so terrible and her acting so awkward that I honestly thought that the twist of the movie was going to be she wasn't Australian. And if the movie did that, it honestly would have saved her from this list, because at least it was terrible on purpose. But instead, the movie played the entire thing straight, and that is why I feel Kate McKinnon deserves the award for worst performance of the summer. Now we move on to animated feature films, which I couldn't help but feel was shockingly small this year. There have been slim pickings, I feel, for those wanting an animation craving, but here we are talking about the ones that stand out the most. Resident Evil Vendetta is something that came right out of left field for me. The animation looked pretty good despite the budget it probably had. And it had a really great suspenseful thriller portion toward the beginning and fantastic action set pieces toward the end. But everything in between is just slow, boring, and, Resident Evil. But for a film that consistently looks fantastic, check out Cars 3. I've hated everything that's been in the Cars franchise so far. The story was just sort of a mix of Rocky Balboa and Creed, but it tells its story in a fun way that fits the Cars style. The film is surprisingly dramatic and emotional to the point where I want to see Pixar do a straightforward drama rather than a family-friendly kids film. But when it tried to be a comedy, I did feel that it dragged a bit. But there was also one animated film that was the whole package. Captain Underpants the first movie was so creative and imaginative that it knew how to play with the space it was given. They kept switching up animation styles to make a point. This movie was just really unforgettable. The story brought you back to a time when you made up crazy worlds with all your friends. It is new and nostalgic all at the same time. I would highly recommend watching this film because it's the best animated film I've seen all summer. And as for the worst animated movie, there was a diverse list of films that made the list really hard and quite difficult. It's just the Emoji Movie. The movie is just soulless, stupid, and aggravating, and we're talking about a movie that came out the same summer as Despicable Me 3. But I will have a special runner-up showcase for this category because I really do love talking about the second worst animated film I've watched all summer, The Nut Job 2. It is amazing about how everything I hated about the Emoji Movie is also just prevalent in The Nut Job 2. The cheap animation, the repetitive nature of the story, everything about this movie makes me feel just as angry as the Emoji Movie. The only thing that makes this a bit more tolerable is the fact that this isn't a 2-hour commercial. So naturally, the Emoji Movie wins for worst animated film. When it comes to films, sometimes I just like to go in completely blind, but with the internet so engraved into our culture the way it is and how often I go to the movies, I see trailers for essentially every film that gets a major release. And sometimes films and trailers just do not look appealing. So the only way to actually get me to watch some of them is to walk up to the box office of a theater and just ask for the ticket for the next thing playing. And sometimes it can lead to me being surprised by a movie I had otherwise no intention of watching. King Arthur, Legend of the Sword is one of those movies. Every trailer for this film just looked awful. Of all things, it looked exactly like the Huntsman movies, and trust me, that is not something you ever want to be compared to. But after watching it, I was pleasantly surprised. While it was far from the best film, there was a lot of heart put into it, and Guy Pearce's signature style was ever present in the movie. It didn't overstay its welcome at all, and I can't say it wasn't a fun night. But even then, I don't feel like that was the biggest surprise of the summer. Valerian and the City of 1,000 Planets is a movie that I thought wouldn't work for me in the slightest. I never really liked The Fifth Element, and looking at all the trailers, I expected it to be just more of that. But after watching it, I was shocked with how much fun I was having. When it tried to be an awesome sci-fi adventure, it was a blast. Yeah, it wasn't the best film that I watched during the summer, but it was one I just expected to hate. So my biggest surprise of the summer is Valerian and the City of 1,000 Planets. And on the other side of the spectrum, there are a lot of movies I was actually really excited for that ended up letting me down. If you watched the original summer marathon from 2014, then you'll remember that I loved 21 and 22 Jump Street. Those films took the original show and modernized it in a way that not only made fun of the original series, but reboots in general. The trailers for Baywatch reminded me of those films, and even though I knew there was no way it was going to be as good, I at least hoped it would be entertaining. Instead, I got something that was just mindlessly stupid, and not even in an enjoyable way. Not only was it the first in a long list of comedic blunders of the summer, but it also had the goal to at least pretend to seem like it was okay. I was sold on every trailer, and after the first 10 minutes of the movie, I already knew how dull the entire thing was going to be. But I was stuck in the theater for the runtime, and I was just pissed off the whole time. But there is another movie that I felt dropped the ball a bit harder for me. While I know this is an unpopular opinion, Logan Lucky was a movie that seemed like it was going to be one of the greatest movies of the summer. But sadly, instead of being something that is fantastic, all I got was painfully average. Nothing in it actually really stands out. My friend Thomas and I did nothing but talk about how angry we were this movie was just painfully average. It would have been forgivable if the movie was absolutely awful, because at least there was something to talk about, but with a movie that's just average, it just really leaves a hole in your heart. Logan Lucky was my absolute biggest disappointment of the summer, because it looked like it was going to be something absolutely fantastic and gave me something that was nothing more than just average. There are so many terrible films that do come out, but that doesn't mean you can't have fun with them. Your guilty pleasures are films that you watch that are just disgustingly terrible that you find very, very endearing. And no film fits the mold more than Diary of a Wimpy Kid: The Long Haul. If Captain Underpants was one of the best ways to make a childish film, this does the complete opposite and makes a terrible one. It is immature in the absolute worst ways when it comes to the story and pacing, but while watching it, there was this weird moment where I just feel like nothing mattered. I was laughing, I was having fun, and even though I saw every little flaw the movie had, I can't say that I hated it. And I must say that The Diary of a Wimpy Kid: The Long Haul is my biggest guilty pleasure of the summer. You know, in a summer that has so many R-rated comedies, it's shocking that almost none of them made the list. Instead, I guarantee you'll be shocked on what I find the actual funniest from this summer to be. Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 was the first film to be released this summer and kicked off this entire marathon. And let me tell ya, it was really funny. Instead of trying to create a realistic world with these characters like most of the MCU, Guardians 2 is the only one that I think is actually a comedy rather than just a film with comedic elements. And there were times I found it genuinely hilarious. For a majority of the summer, Guardians 2 is the film that made me laugh the most. But that was until Captain Underpants, the first movie. Captain Underpants is a film that is immature, stupid, and absolutely childish, and that is why it works so well. It uses its immaturity not to pander to children, but instead as a way to explore our characters, Harold and George. They become the most hilarious characters and create an atmosphere that makes the entire thing super hilarious. They take this movie into the weirdest turns, changing the animation styles, derailing even the most intense scenes, all while staying true to their character and the style. And I thought this was going to be the highest comedic point of the summer up until the very end. The Hitman's Bodyguard was a movie that reveled in exactly what it wanted to be. It had a concept and did nothing but stick exactly to it. Ryan Reynolds and Samuel L. Jackson both have personalities that clash so well against each other. All they do is roast each other and themselves on camera. At no point does it try to take itself seriously. Unlike Guardians 2 and Captain Underpants, it doesn't try to stop being anything other than gut-wrenchingly hilarious. With how much these summer comedies have shit the bed, seeing one that actually worked was a welcome change of pace. And Hitman's Bodyguard definitely gets my award for funniest film of the summer. Instead of laughing, sometimes we want a movie to make us feel absolutely tense. Some of my favorite movies are horrors and thrillers. In fact, I made one as my senior thesis film in college. So, what film over the summer pushed me to the edge of the seat the most? Well, Ridley Scott really knows how to create an atmosphere using nothing but a spaceship and a xenomorph. And the moments where David and Walter interact are some of the most interesting scenes of the summer. However, a big negative is the fact that all of this is mostly designated toward the last 15 minutes, leaving the rest of the movie just to be super dull. As someone who grew up watching the original Alien, I was severely disappointed that this wasn't better. However, Christopher Nolan has become a director that is fantastic at manipulating emotions. Dunkirk is easily one of the best World War II movies that has come out recently, and one thing that it does is create some of the tensest scenes that I've seen in this style. The three separate stories and the timing in which they all cut together is something that adds to the pacing and the tension that you feel watching the movie. But even with Christopher Nolan at the top of his game, it does not compete with the genius that is It Comes at Night. The film is nothing but atmosphere, tension, and suspense. When it comes to what you see on screen, you only get the information of what our characters see. For majority of the film, there's only a single light source, obscuring the mystery of what could actually be out there. This story also keeps you on your toes, keeping you in the dark until the very end. I would highly recommend watching it since this gets my most suspenseful film award. Since this is the summer after all, a lot of movies are released that aim to be the absolute largest films. Some of these films attempt to be effects to impress, but others use it in more subtle ways to create a real-life world. So which one deserves to be crowned with the award of Best Visual Effects? Well, let's get it out of the way. As much as I absolutely hated Transformers this summer, you cannot deny how awesome all the Transformers looked. As with every film, the amount of moving parts and how smooth the animation is what makes the film stand out most. But that's about as far as I can praise the film since every other technical aspect is god-awful. But at least one film was released this summer that was very consistent in using the effects to create a world and was pretty original in execution in the process. Valerian in the City of 1,000 Planets uses the effects to create a truly unique world. The film created a world that was refreshingly original. From the action scenes that take place in 2 different dimensions to Rihanna's tonally confusing striptease, the effects of this movie really knew how to bring the City of 1,000 Planets to life. But my main issue with the film was how much the effects sometimes distracted from the movie itself. But my main issue with it is how much the effects seem to distract distract from the film itself. While sometimes they looked absolutely stunning, other times it just felt like visual clutter, and sometimes just looked terrible because of it. The one movie this summer had effects that were so incredible, so consistent, so realistic that it blurred the lines between what was real and what was CGI. War for the Planet of the Apes created a world that looked nothing short of astounding. At no point did I ever start thinking that somehow this was fake. The apes looked real, felt real, and the way everyone interacted with them shows how well integrated into the world the effects truly were. For years to come, this is going to be one to beat when it comes to special effects, and it also receives the winner of Best Special Effects. But just because some films this summer knew how to create worlds with its special effects doesn't mean all of them did. Sometimes films tried to be gigantic without the budget, the actors, or the director that could make them all seamlessly blend together. And no film fails at its special effects as much as The Mummy did. Minus the opening action scene, everything the movie attempted to do just looked cheap. From the unveiling of the mummy to the destruction of London, nothing really worked. It's obvious how cheap the whole movie is, especially with how Universal's trying to get their Dark Universe series out the door quick. To get this out for the summer, some of the effects just don't feel like they're finished. And I can easily say that worst effects goes to none other than The Mummy. This is it, the big award. Out of the 33 films that I've seen this summer, what was the best? War for the Planet of the Apes was one of those films that shocked me at every turn. Caesar as a character absolutely blew me away and is a majority of the reason why this film worked so well. It is a fantastic conclusion to his story and brings together everything that made the other Planet of the Apes films so special. This is easily one of my favorite films of the entire summer, and the rebooted Planet of the Apes trilogy is my new favorite trilogy. But despite that, the story is a bit on the predictable side. Any character that isn't Caesar is just ape or evil human. While the emotional journey of Caesar was fantastic, Baby Driver had a fantastic story and style that drew me in even more than Planet of the Apes did. From the musical style, the editing, the pacing, everything was done to an almost artful degree. Whenever Edgar Wright releases a movie, it becomes one of the highlights of the entire year. I loved every part of watching this movie, and it was full-on crazy road trip of a film. But sometimes, movies that are crazy art films are not as fun to me as something that mirrors reality. And that's why the best film of 2017 to me is none other than The Big Sick. The Big Sick is so incredible, so real, so hilarious that it is unlike anything that has come out this year. The raw emotion and dedication that this film has is what makes this film stand out above the rest. If you see one film from this entire list, make it this one, because you will laugh, cry, and every emotion in between. Trust me when I say you will not have this incredible of an emotional journey from anywhere else. The Big Sick tells its story in a way that's hauntingly relatable. It is a truly unique and heartwarming take on the romantic comedy genre. Kumail Nanjiani gives an absolutely stellar performance and becomes one of the most emotional characters of the summer. Anybody who watches this movie will fall in love with how real and pure it all is. And that is why The Big Sick deserves the best film of the summer. And if there's a best film of the summer, there's got to be a worst. And trust me, this summer has so many low points and terrible films that it was actually really hard to narrow it down to just the absolute worst. Snatched was the first film of the summer that really made me feel like this was a lost cause of the summer. Amy Schumer is a terrible comedian, and everything that is bad about a lot of her specials is here in spades. It's raunchy with absolutely no payoff, which is a problem that a lot of movies this summer actually had. Nothing in this movie really worked at all. It was absolutely dreadful, and making it through that movie this summer was one of the hardest things I had to do. But that's the sad thing about this summer. The fact that an Amy Schumer movie was not the lowest point makes me sad for the entire film industry. Transformers: The Last Night was a movie so bloated and confused that this was the first time I was truly broken over the summer. Even the worst of the Transformers movies knew how to be at least entertaining here and there. But this was the first time I felt bored, angered, and insulted. Even the effects weren't nearly as impressive as they've been in the past. Almost every technical aspect of this movie was awful, from the aspect ratio to the effects to the actors just seeming bored. The fact that we already have 3 more films on the way in this series makes me want to slam my head into a desk. But that's the incredible thing, is that wasn't even the worst part of the summer. There was one film that stood above the rest on being absolutely commercial. Yeah, it's the Emoji Movie. You all saw that coming. The fact that the word movie is in the title is the only reason I can and say that this is a movie rather than a 2-hour commercial for a bunch of apps that you probably already have on your phone. No one cared about this movie unless you were TJ Miller. This movie had no effort put into it, and the fact that something like this gets a green light and a budget over probably hundreds of other original ideas makes me sick to my stomach. Everything that I hated about Hollywood and the big studios is exemplified here. If you want an absolutely terrible and angering experience, then pirate the Emoji Movie and give it a watch. And I never tell people to pirate stuff because I want you to support originality in the arts. But the Emoji Movie is just a commercial and deserves no money to be given to it. The more money that this movie gets, the more we're telling studios that it's okay that they do this. The Emoji Movie is the absolute worst thing I've seen all summer and probably will be the worst of the entire year. Well, all the awards have been giving out, and I want to thank you all for joining me on this journey. But I don't want it to end here. I want to hear your voice about all this, and I want to know what your best and worst of the summer was. Did you agree with me, or do you think I'm full of shit? Was there even something that I missed this summer entirely? Let me know in the comments down below, and for more reviews, please subscribe, because next up is something that I know a lot of people are really excited to see me play. Well, again, thank you guys so much, and I will see you next time.